How you doing? Thanks for staying with us on Nightlife. It's now 1:06 in the east and 11:06 in the west. And of course, that song I played for you just before the news was not Closer by Alana Wilkinson. It was Hold Your Nerve by Boy and the Bear. Well, a bit later, a fascinating history of the Swiss Army knife with our Nightlife design guru Michael Bogle. But now it's the time of the night when we visit an international location, and tonight we're off to Italy. And Italians are well known for their incredible cuisine. They've exported it around the world: cappuccinos, gelato, pizza, and of course pasta. Now, one of the world's largest energy infrastructure operators wants the pasta industry to change the type of fuel it uses in its factories. A trial is being carried out to switch the pasta industry from natural gas to hydrogen. Now, it will mean less carbon dioxide is released into the atmosphere, as hydrogen doesn't create any harmful emissions. So the pasta that's made in the process will be better for the environment, but will it live up to the taste test? Well, joining me is Marco Alvera, Chief Executive of Snam, the largest national natural gas utility in Europe. Great to have you on the program, Marco.
Thank you, Indira. Thank you. It's afternoon here in Milan, and good night to you all in Australia.
Well, first of all, tell me about the trial. You chose a pasta company near Naples to demonstrate how this can work.
Yes, pasta is just the starting point, of course. Our ambition is to lead the world, and Australia is a great place to start the hydrogen revolution, to bring clean fuel to every industry that cannot be electrified. So what we did with this particular instance was take a factory that was at the end of our pipeline network and offer them the chance to test for the first time in the world a blend of natural gas and hydrogen. This was a company running on natural gas, and we said, what if we give you first a 5%, and now we're targeting a 20% blend of hydrogen and natural gas at the same time. And it worked. They were happy. I can confirm the pasta tastes exactly the same because the heating process is exactly the same. And it's been a success. We really did that to showcase to the world that it can be done. And the beauty of this is that it's a way of putting renewable energy straight into the grid without the need to have batteries or to electrify or to change a factory. This is a 20-year-old factory, no need to upgrade any bit of their gear, of their infrastructure, and they were able to take, for now, 10%. Hopefully we can go up to 20%.
Okay, Marco. And was there any reason why you picked the pasta industry to start your trial at?
It was a lucky coincidence. I had not anticipated the global media interest and as you said at the opening, the fact that it was pasta and that people associate Italians with pasta, it actually really helped spread the message. We did this experiment to show the world it could be done, and the fact that it was pasta turned out to be lucky for us as messengers, and for the company itself, Oro Giallo, that got a huge boost in sales all over the world.
Now, you said, Marco, that you hooked up tanks of hydrogen and natural gas to existing gas lines, and I guess that was the key, that you can use existing systems when you make this change.
Yes, I have been worrying about climate for the last 20 years. I've worked in Enel, which is the world's largest renewable energy company. I worked in Eni, that also has operations in Australia, one of the world's largest oil and gas companies. Now I work in Snam, and I've always struggled to see how we could go 100% renewables. Renewables are fantastic, are coming down in cost. Regions of the world with a lot of sun or a lot of wind, like Australia, can eventually generate enough energy from renewables, but the problem is to transport that energy to where it's needed, to store it for when it's needed. And that's really the downside of renewables. So with hydrogen, it's ideal because we can use the energy of the sun, use it to crack water, essentially H2O, into oxygen and hydrogen. And then the hydrogen is a gas, so it can go into the existing infrastructure, and it can be transported over great distances and it can be stored over years and decades, whereas that will only last for a few hours.
And the attraction of hydrogen, as I said in the introduction, is it doesn't create any harmful emissions. I mean, other than water as the byproduct, there isn't anything harmful that comes out of the process.
There's nothing harmful at all. Hydrogen is the most natural element. The Big Bang, when the universe started, was essentially a big hydrogen explosion. The sun, the rays of the sun, are a burning hydrogen ball, essentially. And our body has 10% of hydrogen in it. And so it's really the most abundant and natural element we have. Our planet is rather small compared to other planets, so hydrogen escapes because of the size of our planet relative to this tiny molecule. So we only find it on our Earth attached to something else. If it's attached to oxygen, it becomes water. If it's attached to carbon, it becomes either oil or natural gas is CH4. And so our job is to recreate hydrogen by separating out the other molecules, and then it behaves exactly like a fuel, but you make it with the sun or the wind. So it has the best of both worlds. It has the best, let's say, cleanness and renewability of solar energy, and it has a usability of oil and gas and coal, in the sense that you don't need to change your lifestyle and stop traveling and stop taking airplanes and stop shipping. You can continue with the lifestyle we've been used to, but doing it in a completely sustainable and renewable way.
So, Marco, there just seems to be only positives involved in using hydrogen. Why hasn't it been used as a fuel source in industry up till now?
Indira, that's a great question. I went to a global hydrogen event in 2002 in Japan, a 10-day conference. That's the year when, you may remember, Jeremy Rifkin wrote this very successful book, The Hydrogen Economy. He was advocating, he was 17 years ago, for hydrogen as a kind of an internet for the energy world, able to interconnect everything. I came back from this conference thinking, beautiful idea, great technology, but it's costing 40 times more than oil. So there's no way people are going to replace oil with hydrogen. It's just too expensive. It can only work in the lab on very niche applications.
Right.
And what's happened in the last 17 years, and this is mainly due to Italy, Germany, and the UK and Spain, these four countries, about 15 years ago, almost single-handedly decided to go down the solar path. They have spent hundreds of billions of euros that consumers in Italy and Germany and Spain are still paying in subsidies for solar. And this brought the cost of solar down by a factor of 20. And so, and the other element you need to make hydrogen is this electrolyzer, which is basically a tank that you fill up with water, a big, like a pool-sized tank. And then you run the current through this water and you essentially separate the oxygen from the H2. These electrolyzers are handmade objects. It's a niche market. It's an artisanal product. Our view, and we wrote a book on this, is that as the cost of solar continues to fall, and the cost of these electrolyzers falls as they get standardized and industrialized, hydrogen will be competitive with oil in the next 5 years. And this is really why it's not the second time. It's going to be a third time lucky, because let's remember that hydrogen at the beginning of the 19th century was essentially already in London, running in cities. The city gas was a mix of hydrogen. In Jules Verne in The Mysterious Island talks about a future of hydrogen. Then oil came along and it was just too cheap to compete with. And now hydrogen and solar energy is getting so cheap that it's becoming cost competitive.
It's interesting, Marco, that you say within 5 years you think that it'll become competitive enough to, compete with oil and solar. How much of, say, a country like Italy's energy needs could hydrogen fuel?
So we think by 2030 about 5%.
Right.
And the country is coming up with a national plan that will probably be on the conservative side, maybe 3.5%. Germany last week, and Germany is not as sunny as Italy, although in the north it's quite windy. Germany has said that it can reach 5%. Portugal said 5% by 2030, which is really around the corner in energy terms. And by 2050, I think it's going to be about 25%. So the outlook for Europe is, let's say in 2050, when Europe has a commitment to get to zero CO2, it will be 50% renewables, straight renewables into the electricity grid, 25% hydrogen, and the remaining 25% will be kind of biofuels and biomethane and other bioproducts.
Yes, it's fascinating. We could really see quite a dramatic shift in the types of fuels that countries are converting to. You've been passionate about hydrogen for a number of years, as you explained. You even wrote a book about it, the Generation H. How has it been for you being a convert but not seeing the rest of the world change their position?
I think they have, Indira. I mean, as I wrote the book, I was a bit of an outlier. This was only in October. And you're an author yourself. You know, one of the concerns as you write a book is how quickly it becomes obsolete, especially if you're talking about technology. Mm-hmm. And the bad news for me and the good news for the industry is we're now in June, and a book written in October of 2019 is already obsolete, because in the book I said it was going to take 10 years to get to oil parity. And now I'm upgrading the book already because it's going to be 5 years. And as I mentioned, Australia's coming out very soon with their own very ambitious energy plan. We've been in touch with the chief scientific advisor to the government and some government officials and some investment funds. Australia has a huge potential. Just think that a tiny fraction of the desert could generate enough hydrogen that Australia can export to Japan. And so it's really a technology that favors parts of the world that have sun, have wind, have space, and have the appetite, the industrial capability, the labor force, and the appetite to develop a new kind of clean industry. So it's a transition that will generate jobs as well as clean the planet, and it's very democratic, because some countries and parts of the world that haven't been blessed with the luck, or some say the curse, of finding oil can now turn the sun into a local resource for their own needs and potentially for export as well. So it will greatly enhance energy access.
My producer has just told me that there's a town in central Australia, Yulara, that's about to go total hydrogen energy. I don't know if you've heard about that.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I did hear about that, and I think Australia is really on the cutting edge, as in many technologies, also on hydrogen. Some of the ideas for the book I did actually get from researchers and investors in Australia who are spending a lot of time on this. Your country is very focused on environmental issues, rightly so.
Now, Marco, tell me about your company, Snam, S-N-A-M, what it is and what it does.
So Snam is the world's largest transporter of energy, essentially, outside of Russia. The biggest company in the world is Gazprom. We are the number 2. The number 3 is TransCanada. So we take gas from Russia, from Libya, from Algeria, and we transport it all over Europe, and then we store it in big reservoirs, and we have LNG as well. So we're a big infrastructure company, and that's why we think in the 70s and 80s, when the natural gas industry started, it was companies like us investing to connect the resources to the markets, and I think that's going to be what will be needed for hydrogen. It's going to be a little, as I said, more democratic. Barriers to entry are a little lower, but you'll still need to develop big solar projects in the deserts, essentially. So I'm thinking about North Africa, Australia, some in South America, and then connecting these big parks and solar projects with the markets. And you'll need big pipelines, and you can liquefy hydrogen, you can transform it into ammonia. So a lot of people think I'm pushing the hydrogen agenda because I'm running Snam. Few people know that I actually joined Snam because I see Snam and this type of company as the place where the transition can happen and where we can scale it up. So we're working in India and China and working directly with many governments. And
Marco, given this environment with COVID-19, what effect or impact has that had on Snam and its distribution of natural gas?
We are based in Lombardy, that you may know is one of the first. It was the first kind of outside of Asia and one of the hardest hit regions in the world. So we've had very difficult weeks. Now it's improving a lot. We're back to business as usual when it comes to our activities. We managed to keep the lights on and to keep the energy flows safe all over Europe. Looking forward, I think the COVID will bring a big acceleration on the energy transition. European governments will use the Green Deal as sort of a Marshall Plan, and there's kind of a post-war reconstruction effort going on in terms of the magnitude of the funds that are made available. And a lot of those monies will be linked to very specific green and renewable initiatives, and hydrogen is mainstream. So with our book, we gave a little bit of a contribution to the debate on this. And the Vice President of Europe, Mr. Timmermans, he's now making hydrogen a central part of the European decarbonization effort, and he's allocated 1,000 billion euros to do that. So there's a lot of money, and I just hope it gets spent in the right way.
Well, Marco, you know this energy business so well. You're a veteran of the industry. Tell us a little bit about your journey. You talked a bit about climate change. That's obviously a passion of yours as well.
Yeah, well, I studied philosophy at university in London at the London School of Economics, and then I did a degree in economics and joined Goldman Sachs, the investment bank in New York and London, and then I was an entrepreneur.
Oh,
and then I fell in love with energy.
Philosophy and economics, you don't often see them together.
In the UK, you do a little bit. It's called PPE or philosophy. I think there's a lot of similarities if you think about Marx and, is he a philosopher or is he an economist? I think the kind of the politics is a nexus between the two. I was actually very happy to be able to study those two topics together. And then I went into banking, which had I not gone into banking, my university would not have taught me the basics of business and accounting and stuff. So banking was a bit of a training for me. And then I did a startup in 2000. That was when the dot-com was a thing to do. And so I was a dot-com entrepreneur. And then I fell in love with energy when I was very young. I was 26, 27. I became an executive in NL, and I just always thought energy is a place where you can have an impact and trying to improve the world.
And you gave a TED talk about fairness. Why is that an issue that's important to you?
That's funny you asked me that. It was a cultural shock to move from a Wall Street investment bank, which has a culture of big bonuses if you do well and getting sacked if you don't do well. Not that bank in particular, just the culture of investment banking is a little bit like that. And the Anglo-Saxon culture maybe a little bit like that. And in Italy, I was running big businesses inside these state companies where essentially you don't fire anyone and you don't really pay bonuses. The kind of bonus, everyone gets the same bonus. And so I was shocked at the beginning. How can I motivate these people if I can't pay them? And how can I get rid of the non-performers if I can't fire them? And then I went through a journey of kind of psychology and looking at neuroscience and talking to headhunters and specialists. And I actually discovered that I was really shocked that these companies, without the normal levers of paying and firing, were actually performing better than some kind of much more aggressive Anglo-Saxon companies. Like some of these companies I was working in, as I said, Enel is the world's biggest renewable company, competing with very aggressive hedge funds and investment funds. And I was really intrigued philosophically at how this culture could succeed, even though and observing my friends and my colleagues, I really discovered that the fairness that came with a culture of not being fired or not being paid a bonus, that sense of kind of being a little more relaxed, that made magical things happen. Like a jazz band, when they play, they're just chilled and the best music comes out of an unscripted piece. And so I discovered there's actually a lot of science to back that up. If you feel safe, if you feel you're being treated fairly and you're not worried about losing your job, I call them the unfairness antenna they come down, and you just perform a lot better. You're a lot more motivated. If your unfairness and tennis stick up because your boss is unfair, then you're not creative, you're anxious, you're not going to collaborate, you're not going to take any risks, and you just perform a lot worse. And so basically I'm giving you a 2 minutes view, but there's a lot of science on this. It's really fascinating, and I'm just convinced that companies need to have chief fairness officers, and if companies want to outperform, they need to make fairness a core part of their culture and their strategy.
Hear, hear. I agree wholeheartedly with you, Marco. Thank you so much.
You should see yeah, great. I know it's funny on the TED you have people commenting all sorts of things. There's people who think that you have to be nice to be fair, and it's not like that. I mean, being fair, sometimes you need to be really tough to be fair.
Exactly.
It's not about being nice. It's just about being fair.
That's absolutely true. Marco, thank you so much for joining Nightlife tonight.
I really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot. Marco Alvera, the Chief Executive of Snam, an operator of natural gas in Italy and across Europe, who are doing some trials of putting hydrogen into the pasta-making industry in Italy. And he believes within 5 years, hydrogen will be very competitive and we'll be seeing it driving a lot of our industry.